Hey guys, hope all of you are doing great. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I am going to share you my experience of flying with Ryanair, one of the most profitable budget airlines in the world, and we are going to look at 7 specific points to see if such a model is going to be feasible in India. Point number 1, ancillary revenue. So on that particular flight between Cologne, Germany and Berlin, Germany, I had to print my boarding pass or at least have a digital boarding pass before coming to the airport, and I also had to additionally do the online check-in. If I failed to do that, I had to pay exactly 50 euro at the airport to get my boarding pass. The funny part was my flight was only costing 5 euro, right? So I had to pay 10 times the cost of the flight to print my boarding pass at the airport, right? So this kind of model acts as a huge extra revenue for Ryanair, because definitely there will be certain passengers who will forget to do the online check-in. Imagine such a system in India. Say your flight fare is very low, but you will have to pay maybe 1000 rupees or 1500 rupees as fine for forgetting to print your boarding pass. Do you think people will accept that? Quite challenging, right? Moving on to point number 2. Ryanair used to operate flights non-stop between destinations. I could hardly see any flights which would actually have a stop somewhere in the middle. Why did they do that was to avoid unnecessary extra parking fees in that intermediate airport, right? Do you think such a model is feasible in India? Yes, in certain busy routes you can have non-stop flights, but for example, let's take this route, Coimbatore to Delhi. A good majority of flights will usually even have a stop at Chennai because they probably don't have enough demand for the Coimbatore to Delhi direct flight. So that is also a big challenge in India. Point number 3. This has got to do with the staff. On that particular Ryanair flight, what I noticed was something really interesting. The same person who was sitting in the desk and checking in baggage was the same person who would check the tickets right before boarding, and she was actually the air hostess. So she was doing multiple jobs, and by doing this, Ryanair is able to reduce the number of staff or employees per flight in a great manner. Do you think such a system is possible in India? Well, yes, it is possible, but in India we have a lot of population, and actually I think airlines do a great job of creating a lot of employment opportunities. So if we just look at cutting all the employees to reduce costs, that might even have a lot of social consequences. So again, this will be quite challenging in India. Point number 4, which I found quite interesting when I was actually talking to one of the Ryanair pilots just before boarding the flight, was he was actually from the city of Cologne, and my journey was from Cologne to Berlin. And he told me he would fly Cologne to Berlin and bring back the flight from Berlin back to Cologne, and he would sleep in his own home. If you look at the case of India, on most flights in Indigo or even for that matter Go Air and other flights, I've noticed a good majority of people come from very different cities compared to routes they are flying. So as a result, the airlines are forced to book maybe like a 4 or 5 star hotel accommodation, even cab service to pick them up from the airport to the hotel and all that, right? So all these expenses get added up in India. So if airlines like Indigo can do a process where they could find people from different parts of the country and let them serve the route where one of the cities is their home city, they could actually cut down on these expenses, because these people could return back to their home to sleep for the night, and this would cut a lot of cost for Indigo. So this is something which is probably doable, right? Point number 5. Again, this has got to do with an extended version of ancillary revenue. On that Ryanair flight, all I could get for free was maybe a small glass of water. Everything else would be charged, right? And I noticed actually a decent number of people did buy themselves a drink or even some cake or something. In India, do you think this is really possible? I doubt it, because usually the flight fares are already pretty high in India. On top of that, if you have to pay 300, 400 or 500 rupees for a sandwich, the price sensitive Indian market, I think it's going to be really challenging. So this is another issue which we'll have to overcome. We will have to try to implement a Ryanair like budget airline model in India. Point number 6, which I think is again fascinating. So Ryanair usually operates a similar type of flight, like a roughly 180 to 190 seated capacity, same structured flight on almost all routes, right? So what is the big benefit of this? So when they order their airlines from an airline manufacturing company, they can actually get a lot of discounts because they just need one type of flight and they can order a lot of flights in bulk. Do you think something like that is possible in India? Well, yes, definitely, right? If you have a big presence already, I think you can try and probably do this. And during pandemic times when a lot of airlines are going bankrupt, if you have enough cash on the table, probably not a bad idea to negotiate really good discounts, try to get a lot of flights. But the only catch here is you need to operate only one type of flight all across India. And I think some airlines can try to do that, probably. We will see. Next point, which I think is again very fascinating. On one of my other journeys from Berlin to Paris, I landed in the secondary airport of Paris, which is called the Orly Airport. There is a main airport in Paris and there is a secondary airport which is called as Orly Airport. So by doing this, what Ryanair could do was, it was one of the few airlines operating with a base out of the Orly Airport. As a result, they could easily negotiate their parking fees with the airport authorities. Because if the airport authorities wanted to simply increase the parking fees, Ryanair would just shut that airport and might probably even close that route, right? Whereas in India, what I notice is, there are very few cities which have secondary airports or two proper airports operating. I think plans are on to do this in some major metro cities. Maybe if such a system comes, maybe if say Chennai has a secondary airport in the future, and similarly a city like Kolkata also has a secondary airport, maybe some new or budget airlines could fly this route, and since they will probably have exclusive access to that airport, they could easily negotiate on lower parking fees, which will obviously cut down their costs in the long run and which will help them become more profitable. Okay. The final factor as to why Ryanair is able to do this is low cost airfares. On that particular flight I told you between Cologne and Brussels, I actually paid only €5 as I told earlier on in the video, which is 450 rupees. Can you see such a system working in India presently? Unfortunately no, right? And in fact, in June 2021, the Ministry of Civil Aviation released a circular where it put a minimum cap for the airfare of flights based on the duration of the flight. Have a look at this circular, and as you noticed, the minimum fare even for the shortest flights is easily more than 2000 rupees, and at the same time they will also have a maximum cap, right? Going back to the Ryanair example, what I noticed in Europe was on that same flight, my neighboring passenger, right, the person who was sitting next to me, was actually paying €77 for the flight because he had booked it in the last minute, whereas I was paying only €5 for the flight. So with that huge range, Ryanair is able to capitalize and sell tickets at a very high cost towards the end of the filling of seats. Whereas in India, since there is an upper and lower cap, it is really difficult for flights and airlines to play around with this concept. So if the civil aviation could become a little more flexible, bring down this minimum airfare to below 1000 rupees and do not have an upper air cap,
this could give flights and airlines an opportunity to play around more with the price and actually try out a model similar to Ryanair.
So what did we understand today? So we looked at 6 different points as to why Ryanair is able to succeed in Europe, and we tried to weight each of those points to the Indian example and see if it's really possible. The overall answer, as you see, is pretty much difficult, right? So it's not that feasible. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I will see you again in another video. Till then, take care and I'll talk to you next time.